Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're gonna have a bit of a news roundup. I'm feeling a little bit better today, and we had like a ton of stuff come out. None of it groundbreakingly huge, but there was a bunch of things. So we're gonna try to hit through all of them really quick here. Start off here, we're on Wowhead. We have a bunch of articles open. Season 2 tier set secondary stat updates. This is a very small thing. It's for Warrior, Paladin, DK. Basically the plate did not get their stuff updated when everyone else did. And now they have changed the stat weights, and so I'll talk more about the Paladin because that's what we talk about here mostly. But we'll go through the Death Knight and Warrior one as well real quick. So Death Knight, your helm went from Mastery Haste to Haste Mastery. Your shoulders went from Crit Haste to Verse Crit, and the first one being the one that has more, right? So the first word, Verse, Haste, whatever. Chest went from Crit Haste to Haste Verse. Gloves went from Haste Verse to Mastery Crit, and legs went from Mastery Crit to Crit Haste. So it looks like you went from having 2 crit heavies to only 1 crit heavy, 0 verse to 1 verse. Haste stayed the same, but it went to two haste now from 1 haste. So definitely some shifts up in your stats. Hopefully those are good for you. Don't know if they are. It probably depends on what spec you play as well for Death Knight. For Paladin, at least for Ret, this is a net good thing. It's not a huge big deal, but it is like net pretty good. So Helm went from Mastery Haste to Verse Haste. Shoulders went from Crit Haste to Verse Crit. Chest went from Mastery Crit and stayed the same. Gloves went from Haste Verse to Haste Crit. And legs went from Mastery Crit to Haste Mastery. So for Ret Paladin specifically, we lost the low amount of verse on gloves, but gained high verse on helm and shoulders, which are higher stat items anyways. So we gained a good amount of verse in this, which is our best stat. And of course, verse being your best stat is not good, but at least we already have a defensive toolkit. It also increases our survival rate by a lot. Having the verse on our pieces of gear that we have to use is actually a really, really good thing. Maybe legs, for example, being Haste Mastery now, maybe that's kind of the slot you kind of leave open. It kind of depends on eye level from the end bosses too. But interesting here with the helm and shoulders now being heavy verse, you're definitely going to want to use those, I'd imagine. We'll go through the Warrior real quick. Warrior, you went from Mastery Haste to Crit Haste. Crit Haste to Mastery Haste, so just swapping up helm and shoulders there. Chest from Mastery Crit to Verse Haste. Gloves from Haste Verse stayed to Haste Verse. And legs from Mastery Crit to Crit Verse. So Warrior out of them stayed remarkably similar. So don't know what that means for Warrior and DKs and all your different specs, because it's going to mean different things, I'm sure. I will say for Ret Paladin, it's a net good thing. It doesn't really matter that much, but it is a net good thing for Ret. Based on how the class is built now. I guess it's a net bad thing for Ret because we're built to have Verse be our best stat, which is not good. Let's go over these raid trinket tuning hotfixes, Neltharians, class trinkets, and hasted procs per minute. So the Neltharians call trinkets all got changed, and then a couple other trinkets as well, the Black Dragon Scale, the Molten Heart, and the Dread Plate. And what this means, I think it might be in some notes later on here, but what this means is that these were affected by your haste essentially. So the more haste you had, the more procs of this you were going to get essentially, right? And so that obviously scales with some classes way better than others. Now it's not like that at all. So it's nerfed in most cases. However, if you're not like a high haste class or high haste spec, then it is a little bit different. And then there's also some of these were not able to be triggered by healing. So healers, they were worthless for you, and now they're able to be triggered by healing as well. So that's a different thing as well. I guess to be fair, the call to dominance is actually 3 RPPM, was 3 plus haste. So they're trying to keep it similar, but basically nerfed, but not by a ton, but definitely all nerfed. Screaming Black Dragon Scale, unless you're not really a haste user. Dragon Scale, everything kind of the same. The critical strike amount was increased, healing was increased on the Molten Heart, and the damage is just increased on the Enduring Dread Plate. So that was actually just buffed. So some a little bit of annoyance there by some classes because it was like exceedingly good for certain people. It's still really good for those people. It's just not as good. Um, I have some thoughts about it. I guess as long as these trinkets are still really good, I don't mind. But some people, I do think some people sim a little bit too early, and like some the sims are wrong early, and then the sims get updated, and I think there's all kinds of reasons for that, for depending on what spec you play. But um, basically, I think these trinkets should be really good because they're super rare loot or whatever, and they're from one of the last bosses, so they should be really strong. So if this ends up being too big of a nerf, hopefully we can see adjustment in a different way. Maybe just manually update amount the procs or the amount of stat it gives you or whatever. But yeah, a lot of people were a little bit disheartened that they're nerfing like one of the cool trinkets from the raid. We have Mythic Plus tuning hotfixes as well, under wrap buffs. I think there was, I want to make sure, this is just the article they had up, but okay, I was gonna make sure they have the other dungeons as well. So I'm not gonna go through all of these, obviously, because there's like a ton of stuff. But Oldman got Underrock got buffed. Oldman got nerfed. Freehold got buffed as well because just a couple things. Just because Freehold is actually really really easy. So is Underrot, so they got buffed. Everyone I've heard that practiced on the PTR or tested the PTR said that Freehold and Underrot specifically were super easy. Alderman, however, had some abilities nerfed to it. We can look at, well, they had a lot of stuff nerfed at Alderman. So Alderman got nerfed, probably fittingly so. Halls of Infusion. Looks like some maybe minor nerfs here just by scrolling through really quick. Nothing huge, but some minor nerfs, it looks like, to Halls of Infusion. Vortex Pinnacle. Very very small changes essentially here. Vortex Pinnacle, not big. Underrot, as the title would suggest, getting buffed as well, along with Freehold. So nothing huge here. This is just tuning, not a huge thing to talk about or spend a ton of time on. Weaponry secondary stat hotfixes and the average raid. So this is similar to the tier sets having their stats swapped around. I'll specifically talk about Ret Paladin stuff when we get to it, but we'll go through everything really quick. The Protector's Tactical Cleaver, it's a one-handed axe. That went from Haste Crit to Haste Mastery. The Wall Climber's Incursion Hatchet went from Crit Verse to Haste Verse. I would love to see. I would love them to put out a statement to understand like why this is the case, like why some of these things are changed, and why they're wrong to begin with. Even like if they were wrong, like why are they wrong to begin with? I don't know how important any of these are actually. First Crit Mastery Crit. Seems like they changed the for a lot of them they changed just one of the stats, and it would be like the second stat on a lot of them, but some of them they changed everything. So I won't go through all of them, there's just too many. Ranged weapons, since there's only two here, for a bow and a gun for hunters here, you went from Crit Haste to Haste Mastery on the bow, and you went from Haste Mastery to Mastery Verse on the gun. I know some people were complaining about the gun, so apparently this was like a really bad change for at least some hunter specs. But sorry for that, I guess. Shields, again, I'm not going to get into that. Basically, got rid of a lot of mastery. Were very mastery heavy, and they went more into crit and a little bit of haste. Two-handed weapons. This is where it actually affects Ret a little bit. Obviously, these don't matter that much. But the Pillar of Elder Flame Polearm. This went from Haste Mastery to Crit Mastery. Not a huge deal there for Ret. Infernal Scadence. I'll make sure none. Oh, that's the Agility Polearm. I'm sorry. So that definitely doesn't matter for Ret. But for monks and people that might use that polearm, we went from Haste Mastery to Crit Mastery. Infernal Shade Lance. Make sure that's Strength. Haste Mastery to Haste Crit. So maybe like a slight goodness for Ret there. Two-handed Intellect Staff. So that's for casters. Verse Mastery to Haste Mastery. The Obsidian Staff, which is another agility staff, went from Verse Mastery to Haste Verse. And then Ashkendir actually stayed the same. It's still Mastery Crit. So that's the big one you're looking for if you're Ret, and that had absolutely no change whatsoever. Let's go into this hotfixes where they're going to talk about embellishments. The achievement no longer requires a quest brand new digs. That's not a huge deal. Some class changes here. So all we need here is the developer's note, really. Earlier this week, we changed embellishments so they did not scale with class talents, abilities, and set bonus. We decided to revert that change, and we're now making updates to class abilities that unintentionally boosted the damage of non-class effects, such as embellishments and trinkets. So basically, they're fixing it from the class side of things instead of the instead of like trying to fix it from like the embellishment side of it. They're because it made the embellishments not work with versatility when they changed that. And now embellishments will work with versatility again, essentially. So if you're a class that has verse, your embellishments are now, strong again. Items and rewards. Nothing huge here. Small thing there, small thing there. So nothing huge. The big thing on this is the embellishment thing. Basically, you're not getting bonus things from your embellishments, from your talents and stuff. You never were supposed to, but apparently you were for a little bit at least. And now versatility does buff embellishment. So you're talking about tanks, you're talking about monks, you're talking about or like Windwalker monks, you're talking about Ret Paladins, classes that use verse as an important stat. Like if you're rating with 20% verse, you're getting a little bit extra out of your embellishments that other people may not be getting. And then the final one we're going to talk about is class tuning. We'll go through this pretty quick. Havoc getting some pretty it looked like buffs to me. So melee attack damage increased, Demon's Bite increased, Demon Blades increased, Fell Blade increase, Isolated Prey, IB dimmed by 30%, was 25%. So it looks like just straight buffs for Demon Hunter. Vengeance looks like single target buffs for them as well. Doesn't seem anything bad there. I do not know a ton of this, but there's an important developer's note for balanced druids. So basically, apparently you were casting Wrath even when you were in like Lunar Eclipse or whatever. So they're basically trying to make changes to Wrath to where Wrath is stronger during Solar, and you no longer want to use it during Lunar. I don't know if they accomplished that goal or not, because I'm not a balanced druid like theory crafter to know that, but that's essentially what they're trying to do there. It looked like some very minor nerfs to Feral, and some very minor nerfs, or some very minor buffs to Resto, 2%. And just a little bit of nerf here to Feral. I don't know how much that is. Obviously, Feral will never want to be nerfed because they're traditionally weak, so I don't blame them for that. Holy Paladin, this is the one that got nerfed. 3% nerf, does not apply for PvP. And Avenging Crusader now transfers 500% of damage done, was 576, so some nerfs to Holy Paladin. Mistweaver Monk, Essence Font Healing increased by 15%, so a slight buff there. We'll just read the developer's note on the Subtlety Rogue. Class talents that previously modified damage from Spellbook are, in most cases, being updated and standardized with similar effects to no longer affect external damage sources. So this is kind of like the embellishment stuff. But they did have, Subtlety had all ability damage increased by 4%, so it's like a 4% aura buff for Subtlety, so that's pretty good. I won't get too much into the player versus player changes because I don't know exactly what those might mean. They changed a little bit of the set bonuses, it looks like. Havoc Demon Hunter, 2 set bonus, down increased agility by 10% for 6 seconds, was 8%, so a little bit of buff to the set bonus there. And some Rogue as well. 2 set bonus no longer increased. Oh, so this is again just like embellishment type stuff, it looks like. Well, actually, this looks like just a buff for Subtlety. So Subtlety getting buffs here. And then the trinkets. This is they also changed. So while they changed the haste thing for the trinkets, they also kind of like modified abilities or whatever that can proc the trinket. So Neltharian's Call to Dominance now activates from Bestial Wrath instead of Dire Beast Stampede for Beast Mastery. Now activates for True Shot instead of Stampede for Marksmanship. Now activates from Invoke, I don't know how to say that, instead of Call to Arms for Brewmaster Monks. And Haste Rating no longer increases the rate at which players gain these effects, which we already talked about that. Call to Chaos, Haste Rating no longer affects it. Trinkets effects may be triggered by healing spells and abilities. This is one that wasn't affected by healing. This is mostly stuff we've already talked about, just put in a different way. Maybe the most important thing left on here, actually, though, is the Igneous Flowstone. They basically made it so it isn't good for melee anymore. A lot of agility melee, we're going to want the Igneous Flowstone. It's meant to be a ranged trinket, and so they had to change it. It ends up being like a nerf to the trinket. It was extremely strong. This trinket is actually so strong that even doesn't have a stat that I can use as Ret. Like, this trinket still stemmed pretty good as Ret, despite that. So this trinket was way too strong. But of course, the people who were planning on using it are a little upset because now it's not as strong. So yeah, like I said, tons of news. None of it was monumental by any means, but I do need to put out videos when there isn't giant news to do, despite that. So decided, I felt a little bit better. Might as well get on and talk about all the stuff that came out today. Put a little bit of context into it, hopefully, and add something of value. So that's it for this one. Hopefully more stuff coming out. I want to see some Ret buffs. That would be wonderful. And as far as a Ret guide, if you're watching this, like, where's the Ret guide? Where's the Ret guide? I always am cautious about it. There's still some things wrong with the Sims. There's still some things not 100% set in stone. I like to get it right. Of course, if I do get something wrong, I do just make an update video and say, this is wrong, this is the right thing. But it's very important for me to get things right as much as I can with all data available. I will say right now, all data is not available and some of the things are not correct. So I just want to wait a little bit longer on that. So it will be coming. It'll either be the week of the raid or the week after. That's when I always do it. And it sucks if it doesn't come out before the raid, but the reality is, maybe I get like 90% of it right or 85% of it right by putting it out before the raid, and it's mostly fine. But you really feel like you let somebody down, especially if it's like that person already knew that 85% or 90%, and the 10% that you're telling them they didn't know because it's wrong, and then they do that 10%, and that just feels bad in my opinion. And it's one thing, and if I just get it wrong, then that's one thing, because like I'm taking the data that I have and then like getting it wrong. But if it's like because I'm guessing, that makes it feel worse in my opinion. So that will be coming though. But yeah, that's it for this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because that helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody have a good one.